right, good evening, everyone. Glad you're here. Let's go to Ruth chapter 1. Ruth chapter 1. I want to mention something. I thought I'd mention this later, but in the Masoretic text, the way that the Bible is arranged, Ruth actually follows Proverbs. Do you know that? Do you know what the last chapter in Proverbs is? 31, the virtuous woman, a woman of noble character, right? Do you know the only other place outside Proverbs where that's used? In Ruth. Ruth chapter 3, verse 11. And so there's a indication that maybe that's hinting in the Hebrew text of what's coming when we read the book of Ruth. So tonight I said what we would do is we're going to take a little bit of time. Google says, let's see if Google's right, 15 minutes to read Ruth. Who'd be willing to read a chapter? We need 4 people. Okay, Dean? Okay, anybody else? Okay, Susie, welcome back. Yeah, we can do that. That's good. I thought you listen to it. I forget there are people out of town. I always like people to be here if they can, but yes. You couldn't help it. Yeah, you couldn't help. So, all right. Who else would be willing? Well, that's 2 people. Right now they have to read 2 chapters. All right, Grace is going to read one. One more person? It's me. All right. Dean will be 1, Susie 2, Grace chapter 3. I'll read chapter 4. All right. Let's begin, Dean, and then when you're done, if you'll just, as you're closing your final words, make your way up and pass the mic.
Chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the women were left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return, each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said back, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go away, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband, this night, and should I bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for is it exceedingly bitter to me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who is that young woman, or who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work with me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread, and dip into the wine vinegar." And when she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men, "Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her." So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening, and then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who worked for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed." So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law.
Chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young woman you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today."
Chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." And so he went over and he sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here." And they did so. Then he came to the guardian redeemer. "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except for you, and I am next in line." "I will redeem it," he said. And then Boaz said, "On the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and the transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. And so the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And he removed his sandal. And then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Malion. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Malion's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." And then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." And so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and when he made love to her, love how the NIV says that, don't you? The Lord enabled her to conceive, and he gave birth to a son. And the woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms. Sorry. And she cared for him. And the woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. It's good. I think the first thing we see from reading that story is that what looks like a hopeless situation is not hopeless when the Lord's in it. And it got really bad. It looked really bad from the very start, and it just seemed to get worse and worse. And God showed faithfulness, and he showed faithfulness not just to Naomi, but to a foreigner, somebody who stood outside the covenant people, but who became a part of the covenant people. And so tonight what I thought we'd do is we'd start off with our timeline just so we can understand where we're at in the biblical story. We've been doing this, but it's good to do this again. What's first on this? Do you remember? Creation, good, okay. And then? The fall, all right. And? The flood, then what? Babel, okay, good. And then Abraham. Following Abraham, we kind of jump ahead a little bit to the next big event, Exodus. Okay, these are 10 things. And after Exodus, settlement. This is going to include Joshua, Judges, and then the United Kingdom under Saul, David, and Solomon. And then after a United Kingdom, what happens? Their division, okay? And then there's a period where there's two kingdoms that dwell kind of side by side, but something happens. What's the next big move here? What's that? Exile. Okay. First, the northern kingdom, 722 BC, if you'd like the date. And then the southern kingdom in 586, 587. I have different dates for that, but 1 year apart. And then after the exile, the return. Where's Ruth fit in this? Settlement, okay, specifically. The time of the judges. If you look at, go back to chapter 1 here with me, we can see where this is. We're doing this because, one, I think when we can place things in their proper biblical context, we understand the story better. This is one, the Old Testament is one big story. And then the New Testament's part of that story as well. And so if we understand where things fit, we can kind of understand where we are in God's redemption plan. And the other reason we're doing this is they say that if we rehearse something again and again and again, it sticks. And so as we read our Bible, I want us to, if we're in the Old Testament, I want us to start asking the question, where does this fit in this skeleton? Okay? So as you're reading your Bible, be asking that question, where is what I'm reading? Where is Isaiah going to fit in this story? Well, tonight we're dealing with Ruth. And so let's talk in some broad strokes about Ruth chapter 1. Okay, we won't go into as great a depth. We may kind of put another layer on this next week and go a little bit deeper. But I'm going to call this chapter bitterness. Okay, let's just call it bitterness. I think that's a fitting title for this because that's the word that Naomi uses for it. Okay, she talks about her bitterness in the chapter, and we'll see that in just a moment. I'm using the word bitterness here in a different way than we sometimes use it. How do we sometimes use bitterness? Like if there's bitterness, what do we usually think of? Resentment against other people, right? Or maybe you drank some bitter coffee or something like that, but probably when we're thinking in religious terms, we're thinking resentment, like a root of bitterness grows up and spoils many, and there's resentments, and we kind of can feed that if we're not careful. But we're not using it that way. Tonight we're talking about bitterness to describe circumstances that are difficult, like it's a bitter pill to swallow. Okay, maybe that's a good way to think of this. And so bitter is Naomi's own word. You could probably find that here. I think it's near the end of the chapter. Did anybody spot it before me? Let's see who can get there first. Where is it? What verse? Verse 20. All right, Dean gets the quick prize. Yes, verse 20. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. You ever heard that word before in the Bible? Mara? Where else? Yeah, Exodus chapter 15, verse 22. They came out of Egypt, and Moses was leading them. He brought them to bitter waters, and the root word is the same. It's actually, I think, in Hebrew, plural here, marim, and so it means bitter waters. And so we're seeing something of the same thing, and I think most of the time in the Old Testament when the word bitter is translated, we're seeing that word. And so that doesn't mean parents shouldn't name their daughters Mara if they want to. That's fine. Don't run around telling people, you shouldn't allow yourself to be called Mara. Don't you know it means bitter? It does in Hebrew, not in English, so it may be something different. But anyway, let's talk about this. Verse 1 through 5 is a bitter tragedy, okay, verses 1 through 5. And you can see as we read through this that it just goes from bad to worse. Notice here, in the days when judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. I'm going to go back here. We know the connection between Moab and Israel. Everybody remember that? Moab is a distant relative through Abraham. And so here's a picture of Moab down here. You can see a lot of the settlement of Israel there, where the different tribes settle, and Moab being a distant cousin. But they have a difficult, complicated relationship. Like if you ask, what's your relationship with Moab, Israel? Complicated. It's complicated because of some resentments. You remember a dude named Balaam came into the story a little bit, and a king named Balak, and there was some intimidation as the people came through on the way to the promised land and concern there. And so it actually caused Moses to, and probably this is from the Lord, in fact it says it's from the Lord, that there's to be a prohibition against intermarriage with Moabites. And they or their descendants are not to enter the tabernacle or the temple complex up to the 10th generation. So there's that in the backdrop of this. We have to keep that in mind as we're reading through this story. So there's this bitter tragedy that has taken place, and so they moved to Moab because of the famine. And at that time, Elimelech dies. Verse 3 there. Is that verse 3? Verse 3. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. So, and that goes on for a little while. And the 2 sons marry Moabite women. And you have to be careful when you read that, because you might be tempted to read that one of them is Oprah. And it's not. It's Orpah. And the other is Ruth, of course. But this tragedy takes place. It says that they were a family from Bethlehem and Judah. I don't know, does your translation have, anybody in their translation have Ephrathites there? I thought Dean at least read Ephrathites. Do you see it here? It mentions it a little later. Okay, let's talk about Ephrathites, because that comes up in Scripture. Ephrath is the ancient name for Bethlehem. Okay, have you ever heard this word brought up again in Scripture? Or you heard this word before? Ephrath or Ephrathite. Okay, you probably would. It's the term that's used of David in 1 Samuel 17:12 and in Psalm 132:6, and also in Micah 5:2 when it prophesies where the Messiah is going to be born. It mentions Ephrathah. Okay, so you can see it here in Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you're small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will rule over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. And so going back to our map here, let's take a look. I thought I might be able to zoom, but can you see this? Can you see this area right here? There's Bethlehem. That's Ephrathah. Okay, Judah's this big territory. This famine breaks out. They go down to Moab in order to escape the famine. Okay, some things we need to know to kind of have in mind to understand this story, because some of it sounds kind of strange. Like, what's all this about the guardian redeemer? Your translation might have kinsman redeemer there. What's taking place there? What is this whole thing about? And why is it such a big deal that these sons died? Because it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. There's lots of stuff that helps us, and the whole idea of land and how land was tied with marrying into the family. How does all of that work? Well, there's 4 things you should know that will kind of help us lock in on the book of Ruth. And the first one is that widows were to be provided for by their sons. So if the husband dies, it's the sons that take care of the widow. Okay, and that's even the case in the New Testament. You remember that there's some verse about, I think it's in one of the pastoral epistles, about how if there's a widow, the first responsibility to take care of her falls to the sons. Okay, and then if they have no sons, the church should enter in and help take care of that situation. But always the first responsibility falls to the sons. So it's kind of a nod to this whole idea that widows were to be provided for by their sons. Well, that's a major tragedy, because we find out in, looks like verse 4 here, that verse 5, that Mahlon and Chilion also die. So like things have gone from bad to worse. Naomi has left because of famine, Bethlehem. Now she's living in a foreign land. Her husband dies. That's bad. That's like, if you could just see gradual steps down here, that might be a helpful way to view this, is that the first step down is that she's got to move outside the promised land and leave her territory. Second is her husband dies. Okay. Third is now her sons die. She's in a bad position here. What are we to do with that? So widows were to be provided for by their sons. And so if we keep that in mind, we can see the desperation of the situation. There's no Social Security in place. There's no welfare available to her. How is she going to survive? So can you see the desperation of the situation? I don't know that she can even rely upon handouts from local Moabites. So this is a bad situation, and she decides she's going to go back home. All right? The second thing that helps this is just to understand that if a husband dies and leaves a widow without any sons, then what comes into play is what's known as the Levirate law. Okay, lever is a Hebrew word for brother. Okay, so this may sound strange to our modern ears, but if a woman has no sons to take care of her, then the brother or nearest male relative to the husband is to marry her and to raise up a son for the dead person. So the actual son, although this is tricky because in some ways the son actually belongs to the one who's deceased, but the way that the Bible treats Obed, it's as if he's Boaz's son. So there's a little bit of not either or, but both and, if that makes sense. Okay, but that was the responsibility, is to marry and produce a son with her. You can see that in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. Now, Naomi has already said in chapter 1, verse 12, I'm too old. I'm too old to marry again and hope for another son. So that's out for her. What's she going to do? Maybe go back and rely upon the kindness of a relative. It's like it's a distant hope. You can see here, and this is constant in Ruth. The personal name of God is constantly on the lips of the people in this story. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's not. What's the personal name of God? Do you know? Yahweh. Okay, it's not like there's other words that are used for God in the Old Testament. Adonai is one, and that means Lord, with capital L but small O-R-D. Elohim is God, kind of generically. And there's other words that are part of that whole range of words, but the one that's the personal name of God is Yahweh, isn't it? So this is the name that's used constantly on the lips of people in the story. And the really interesting thing is in contrast to what's going on in the rest of Israel during this time, right? How would you describe, if you could put some input, how would you describe the time of Judges? Lawlessness, okay? What else? Everybody, there's no like absolute morals. This is moral relativism. I mean, we think that's a modern thing, but they were doing it in Judges. Okay, anything else? Following the Lord, that's one reason why people are making up their own mind about what's right and wrong. Okay, anything else that you can think of? It's a time of danger. There's violence in the streets. Like, I think there's a comment in the book of Judges that it's worse here than it is in the neighboring nations. Like, it's dangerous in the streets, and people are inventing their own religions, and the law seems to have been lost, and the people of God aren't following God, and they're making up their own gods, and so it's bad. So that's Judges generally, as we've just read, or we've read in Judges before. Ruth, we're told, is during the time of Judges, but everybody in this Bethlehem area seems to have the name of the Lord on their lips. And Bible scholars tell us that indicates that this is like a spiritual hotspot. Like, that might be going on in the rest of Israel, but in Bethlehem area, there's something of a solid devotion and a covenant keeping with the Lord there. And so we can't know that for sure, but those are good clues that these people in this area have kind of kept faithful to the Lord, whereas the rest of the country has gone super crazy. Okay. All right. We're on number 3 now. Sorry. Some things you should know. First, widows should be provided for by their sons. 2, if they don't have sons, then a near relative, male relative of the husband, would raise up a child to the wife, okay? And this is known as kinsman redeemer. For some reason, the NIV calls this guardian redeemer. I'm going to look into that. But this is kinsman is somebody who's related to them in some way. And redeemer means that somehow by paying a price, you're brought into a family, okay? So this is what's taking place here. The third thing is the property of the dead man could be purchased by a near relative in the family. So we heard that. Like, Boaz calls this closer relative to the city gates. That's where, like, court was held. That's where official transactions took place, is at the gate, the city gate. So he calls them all there, and these witnesses to observe all this, and he gives the man the opportunity to buy this land. Why is that important, that the land be bought and preserved in the family? But you have a thought or a guess? Yeah. Yeah, and even if they had to lease it out for a period of time, I think in the year of Jubilee, it all goes back to the original family owners. And this way, Israel, the tribes of Israel and the families and the clans could all keep their portions in themselves, within themselves. And so nobody's like getting rich and excluding everybody else. God's given them each their portion. Portion's a really great word for this. And if you know that, that also explains why what Ahab did to Naboth was so terrible, right? If you know that, because what Ahab was trying to do was trying to take away his family inheritance because it was more suitable to him. And so he arranged things so he could take it. That was wicked. And even if Naboth wanted to trade, like Ahab's like, I got better vineyards. Naboth can't do that if he's going to be faithful to what God has commanded. Do you understand that, the significance of that? So all of this is coming into play as the property. And so this near kinsman's like, yeah, I'll buy the property. But it comes with a string attached. You have to raise up a child to Ruth, Naomi's daughter-in-law. Yeah, and give your portion inheritance away. And I've puzzled over this a little bit, and I wonder why doesn't this guy do this? And I think there's something he says. It puts my inheritance in danger. And so it may be the fact that he's got to give up a portion of his inheritance. The other thing it may have to do with is he's worried about marrying a Moabite. Have you thought about that? He's worried about what that means, because already these two guys married Moabites, and if we just look at things on a very surface level, we're like, you know why they died? They married Moabites. That's why. In fact, in the early church, some people interpreted it this way. The reason these guys died, Mahlon and Chilion, the reason they died is because they married Moabites in direct opposition to the law of God. The problem with that is that Boaz also married a Moabite, and he didn't die, so that's not the issue. And I would encourage us to be careful about sense-making with all of that. I'll talk more about that in a second. Here's a fourth thing that we should know. It was rare for people to adopt the religion of another nation. Okay, and you've read in this chapter, and you've heard, Ruth is like, I'm going with you, okay? Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Even though the way that Naomi interprets all of the bad stuff that's happened in her life is, God did this to me, there's something still that Ruth is like, I'm buying in, okay? I'm going to follow the Lord. I'm going to be faithful to the Lord. Something about Naomi's life, it seems to me, something about maybe an encounter she'd had with God caused her to want to show covenant faithfulness to Naomi. And that kind of covenant faithfulness is the kind of covenant faithfulness that we should have with the Lord. And so I wanted to talk about that for a moment, because there is the interpretation here that Naomi puts upon this, that the Lord has done this to me. If you'll look on down to, it's near the end of the chapter here. She says, I think it says it even before this, but don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Okay? And so Naomi returned from Moab with that kind of disposition. There's a couple things I want to mention about this. First of all, I would encourage us to be cautious about being quick to blame God. Okay, I'd like to tell you why we should be cautious here, and I think there's some good reasons in a moment. But let's be careful about blaming God for the death of these sons. Do you know that Mahlon and Chilion, their names, one of them means frail and the other means weak. And that suggests to me that they've always had a physical disposition that suggested that they were weak. Okay? I'm cautious. I don't think that Naomi and her husband shouldn't have named them, and by naming them that, they put a curse on them. They're probably naming them in accordance with what they saw. And so they recognize that these guys, they weren't in great health. Okay? And so I would say also, don't be quick to blame the men. We could read into story things like, these guys died because they married Moabite women. The text never says that. Okay? The Bible never says that. So be careful about putting this up. Why did they all die? We don't know why they died. The Bible doesn't tell us why they died. The narrator doesn't tell us why they died. And I think the important thing to keep in mind here is it's not even the interpretation that the individuals have that's important. It's the narrator who helps us to make sense of things. And so we have to be careful about being too quick to jump to a conclusion there. If you look with me at verses 6 through 18 there, we're not going to read all of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it next time. She's now setting out to return home, and probably she will take this route here from Moab through Reuben and then over on top of the Dead Sea. But depending on where she is, some have suggested this route too. But she's getting ready to go back. Like, there's no options. My husband's gone. My sons are gone. Out of love for you guys, what I want to see happen is I want you guys to remarry, saying to Orpah and to Ruth, I'd like to have you guys remarried. And so she's set out this decision, and that's kind of a bitter decision too, because it appears that she loves her daughter-in-laws and they love her. But here's what I want to challenge us with. Verse 13 says, would you wait until they grew up? Like, if I had new sons, would you remain unmarried? No, my daughters, it's more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. Okay, that's the interpretation she has. And what I wanted to say about this is that not everything that's bitter is directly God's fault. Okay, and one thing to keep in mind when reading narratives is that some things that are said from the perspective of the person may be truth as they see it, and not the overall truth. Are you with me on that? Like, and we do this all the time. Sometimes we approach God like that, like we see it a certain way, or we even do this with people where we think they're mad at us, and maybe they're not mad at us. And so from our perspective, we think that that's true, but we don't have all of the information. And it occurs to me as we read this story that the overall message of the story is that God was not against Naomi. Okay? She went through something, and she was interpreting it from her moment of bitterness. And I would just caution us that in our moment of bitterness, we're not always seeing clearly what God's doing. And God is going to restore her. Now, I want to say this too. God is the one person. Can I call him a person? Okay. Who has prerogative to give life and take life. Do you agree? So if God takes life, it's not murder. Would you agree? He has the ability to take life, and that's not the same thing, but other people want to blame God and say, well, that's murder. So this is a tricky theological thing here, is who is responsible for this? Is it God? Is it the devil? Is it just natural circumstances that are at play here? And how do we see all of this? So we can see some of this play out in other circumstances that maybe Naomi wouldn't have had the words for here, but in Job you can see some stuff like this happening, but you also see another agent at work, don't you? In Job. Who's the other agent at work as far as we know? The devil's at work. And so he seems to be the one who's actively pursuing Job, whereas God may be permissive in terms of that, but he's not apparently the active agent in accomplishing that. So people call that theological hair splitting. That's fine, but it seems to me that Job goes out of its way in order to give us that message that there is a purpose that's playing out, and there's a divine thing that's playing out behind the scenes here. And so you can see that. And there are examples in the Bible of bitter experiences that turn out to advance the greater good in the end. You can see that in Joseph's story. Like, the brothers, in their free will, chose to do something. And at the end of it, Joseph says, you meant this in this way, but God meant it in this way. Whether God caused it or he turned it that way, that's a matter for dispute. But I think the point is that both God can be working and humans can be working in the same event. Okay, and so I want to caution us. As Naomi says this, she is looking at this through the eyes of bitter sorrow. Okay, and so she may not have all the theological language to express this, and the narrator doesn't come along and say, that the narrator doesn't say to it. You know, there's a narrator, right? There's another perspective. It's not just what Ruth says or Naomi says. There's somebody telling the story. Okay, and the narrator never says God killed Elimelech, and the narrator never says that he killed Mahlon and Chilion. Okay, he never says that. This seems to be at least Naomi's perspective, that the Lord brought this bitterness upon me. Okay, and then even in the midst of that, this book is proof that people can turn to God even in bitter experiences. Ruth being the woman of noble character. And what's that? Yes. Depends on where you would draw the line with Jew and Gentile. But I would think that you would draw it anyone that's not in the patriarchal line, and I would even narrow it. So I would start with Abraham, but then it's not Ishmael, but it's Isaac, and it's not the other sons that he has through his later wife, Keturah, because Abraham married again and had other kids like Midian. It's not them. It's not Esau. He's not. They're not. You're not. I would consider Esau Gentile. Okay, and then you have Jacob and his 12 sons. So it's anybody who's Jacob and his 12 sons or descendants of them. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Right. The Samaritans are a mixed race of people that come because of after 722 BC. And so, yes, there's a narrowing that takes place, and so we have to keep that in mind. I would say probably a good safe definition is anybody who's a descendant of Jacob would be considered Jewish in physical lineage, because we also have that difficult thing of Jesus' statements and Paul's statements. Not everybody who is of Israel is Israel. So all of that's kind of tricky, but I would call Moabites non-Jews. Okay, so they're outside of the covenant people. All right. Yes, and not even just there, but also Rahab. Right, going back to Rahab. That's prior to Ruth. Rahab, and I thought I saw another place where it was, but I can't think of anybody else. Okay, let's draw this to a close here. I think a beginning. We start to see a beginning of change near the end of the chapter here, and so I thought we'd conclude with that. Look at verse 22 and following, and let's think about how this started off. Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was happening. I don't know if you catch this, but this is one of those literary clues that helps us to know what God is doing. What's the cause of why they went to Moab in the first place? It's famine, right? The rest of the story is going to take place around a harvest, isn't it? It's like God is so good. He's beginning to turn things around, even as they set their eyes to return to the land from which they came. And I think there's a real beauty in that. I thought I had another slide here, but maybe not. Oh, here we go. There's your family line right here. So we have Elimelech, okay, married to Naomi. He passes away. And then we have these two die. And then it leaves, it's a great graphic, isn't it? Rest in peace, guys. We have here, and then when Naomi sets to go back, at first her daughter-in-law Orpah is going to go, right? And then she gives her another out, and she returns to her family. I don't know that you can blame her, but Ruth is devoted. This is like an example of covenant loyalty. I think this is supposed to be a picture of Hesed, right? Covenant faithfulness that she shows. That word may even be used here. as she shows this to her mother-in-law. And God rewards her for it, helps her to become not only a part of restoring Naomi's life by bringing a child into her family line, but also she gets to be a part of the lineage of Christ. And that, I think, is really powerful. It shows how God can take really desperate situations and turn them around. And we should always know that we don't have a dead-end God. We've got a way-making God. And he does it again and again. And this is such a beautiful story of how God redeemed such a lovely woman, a woman of noble character. That phrase is used in Proverbs, and then in chapter 3, verse 11, it says that she is a woman of noble character. So we're going to leave off there tonight. Thanks for your gracious attention. Okay, stand with me if you would. Father, I wonder how many times we've looked at situations that have been bad and wondered where you are in all of it. Maybe in some cases we even thought that you're doing this to us. And Lord, I just tonight would hope that we would hear that you are good, and despite how we may perceive things in a moment, that you are good to your people and you bring about the ultimate good in our lives, not just in this life, but in the life to come. And so as we look to you and we trust you and we spend our lives, we bet our lives upon the truth of who you are, I pray, Lord, that you would show us again and again how kind and good you are to your people. We thank you that you showed, even at this early stage in Scripture, how you can graft people in and you can call those who are not a people now a part of your people. And we want to rejoice in that, because probably most of us are Gentile Christians, and we've been brought in, though we were one-time strangers, we've been brought near. And this is such a beautiful example of how your covenant love extends to all. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for being here tonight. God bless you.